The man that also signed away, I think, is the best free agent contract in history. We could make the argument on it being a 1-2 of the best trade in Seahawks history, Randy, because certainly the Russell Wilson trade's looking like a good one in retrospect here with the picks the Hawks made, but you made a pretty good one as well. And this is a little bit of a player in here in Rick Meyer. We got a little bit to get with because you were again there in the early 90s, not as much on, you were part of the process of what drafting him. So real quick question is, would the team have gone with Bledsoe or Meyer if, in your opinion, if let's say they had the choice between the two? I know they didn't because you had New England ahead of them to pick Bledsoe at that time. Okay. And then can you take me through the process of how you pulled off this trade with Meyer when, the star had dimmed at that point? He had the one good first rookie year where it's like, ooh, we've got a guy here. Yeah. And then it just really tapered off, but yet you got a first round pick back for him. Which then you again got Walter Jones. So the whole situation is one that to me needs a little bit of unpacking, if you can, on your part with that one, because it's just a tremendous trade and just the whole situation, how it worked out from it's just wild.
Yeah, it's quite a scenario, that's for sure. I think to answer the first part of your question, we obviously would have taken Bledsoe, Northwest kid, made a lot of sense in Dennis Erickson's offense at the time. It was going to be, I'm sorry, that was not Dennis at that time. That was Tom Flores, who was the GM. And that would have made sense in any offense, to be honest with you. I don't think we really at the time, and I was not one of the decision makers, I don't think Tom really had a preference. In other words, to move up, he would have had to given a pretty penny just to move up one spot. That didn't happen. So we did take Rick. And like you say, Rick had a phenomenal rookie year. He put on a show with his legs, made great strides toward being an NFL quarterback. And then the change at coaching and the philosophy came, and it was completely different when Dennis got there. We were a throwing team. We were not a downhill running team. We were not much of a play action team. So the skill set needed to run Dennis's offense was totally different. I loved Rick. I think Rick was one of my favorite players of all time. It just wasn't going to work out in Dennis's system. We kind of took advantage of a couple things when we narrowed in on Chicago. One, they were looking obviously for a quarterback. Their president at the time, big Notre Dame grad, loved Notre Dame players. Chicago,
Randy, you devil.
I'm just saying, Chicago, close to Notre Dame. It was a giant get for the Bears to get the Notre Dame quarterback who had, been the star in Notre Dame for 3 or 4 years, something like that. So we played on some emotion there, I think, and we're just kind of lucky. I'm not saying it's anything we did. It just worked out that these guys really wanted Rick. And Marvin Demoff was his agent, and Marvin wanted him out of Seattle. And so we all kind of worked together on it. I don't know if there's a trade that I worked harder on that I was, happy to make when we did it. And I remember after we went back and forth, and part of the thing that held up the deal was Rick had to agree to a new contract. And so it's easy to trade a player who, when you don't have to involve the contract and negotiations with that player's contract, it's a whole nother story when that player has to do a new contract, because then he has some say in it. He obviously wanted to go to Chicago. It was close to home. It was going to work out. But Marvin Demoff, in my opinion, one of the best agents of all time, was not going to let Rick go to Chicago without, one, agreeing to the deal, but two, bringing something with him to the Bears. So at the end of the day, yes, we got a first-round pick from them, but I had to kick in a fourth-round pick to go with him so that Marvin and Rick could say, hey, we got you a fourth-round pick and Rick Meyer. So there was some egos involved. There were a lot of give and takes involved, and we thought it was worth it to acquire the first-round pick. And when it happened, and this is the only time I can ever remember doing this, once the trade was finalized, I remember walking out of my office and walking down to see Mickey, and I've referred to Mickey a few times. We spent 15 years together at the Seahawks, and he was at the other end of the hall, and I was coming to see him to tell him, hey, that it's final. We're going to do this. Before I could even say anything, he said, I could see the smile on your face, and he gave me the biggest hug. We hugged like two kids in the hallway. that we were able to acquire a first-round pick for Rick. And what was kind of bittersweet, to be honest with you, because we both loved Rick. We used to play golf with him. We wanted him and his personality to lead the Seahawks for a long time. It just wasn't going to be a good match in the system we were in.
Yeah. If he had been in a pure West Coast offense, of course, I heard that he had gotten the Bill Walsh seal of approval when he came out. If he had been in that offense from day one in his career, starting out and just maintained into it, do you think that Meyer ends up having, he didn't have a bad career, but a more successful career?
played a long time, earned a lot of money. But yes, and to that end, that the 49ers were the only other team that were kind of in the mix for trading for Rick. I remember Eddie DeBartolo was there, and Carmen Policy was kind of running their team at that time. And I remember them calling me, and they didn't have a first round pick. And they tried their hardest to convince me and us to take a second round pick because it was this better for Rick. And he said, we'll give you this second. We'll even give you a second next year on top of it. But they must have spent 30 minutes trying to talk me into trying to make this make sense to me that we should just take their second round pick for the good of Rick and his future. And obviously I couldn't do that, but I always had a little part in my heart that, hey, they were selling, they were trying anything they could to get Rick. And we ended up trading him, like you say, to Chicago for a first rounder. So we couldn't really take the 49ers offer seriously, but they were the other team that, to answer your question, yes, that had given him the stamp of approval when he came out.
Yeah, and those are 2 late second round picks of the Niners at that time you're getting. So basically third round picks at that. Yeah, and no way. No, thank you.